Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Paul Brydges, National Chair of Communities in Bloom, and I'd like to welcome you all today to our first of this year's 2021 Communities in Bloom campaign. Today, we are looking at bringing you the information and some background technical information on the Hope is Growing campaign. And we're going to give you a sort of an outline of how we're going to move forward through it. So across Canada and beyond, our goal is to see our land awash with gardens featuring yellow. Yellow is the international color of hope and Pantone's color of the year, which is very fortuitous for us. So from flowers and fruits, shrubs and vegetables, just start with planting seeds. And parks and playgrounds, front yards, backyards, think about balconies, baskets, boulevards, planters. Wherever there's an empty space, there's room for a plant. And together we can make this program come to life. So at this point, I'd like to thank our Hope is Growing sponsors and partners. They've been working to help us carry this campaign and program forward. We have the Canadian Nursery Landscape Association, Garden Centers Canada, Scott's, the National Garden Commission, Nutrients for Life, Come Alive Outside, the Compost Council of Canada, Canadian Garden Council, Green Cities Foundation, Wentworth Landscapes, Brydges Landscape Architecture, and Collins. Your support for helping us spread this campaign across Canada this year is just tremendously valuable to all of us, and we can't thank you enough. So this spring, anyone and everyone, including municipalities, organizations, schools, churches, colleges, and universities, clubs, businesses, and individuals can participate by planting a Hope Garden. Share photos of your gardens on social media, tagging Communities in Bloom, and using the hashtag Hope is Growing. Register your garden online at www.hopeisgrowing.ca and learn more about our Hope is Growing contest. And also to find garden center members in your area to purchase your yellow flowers, trees, shrubs, and veggies. Through our presentation today, please feel free to ask your questions in the question and answer feature. And we'll do our best to get through them all as we can. You'll find the question and answer feature at the bottom of your screen. And if it disappears, just hover over that area with your mouse and it should pop up again. And again, we'll try and do our best to get through these questions for you. So before we get started formally today, I'd really like to welcome our two keynote speakers coming in, Mark and Ben Cullen. Dear friends and colleagues of mine, and I can't thank them enough for joining and spending some time with us today. Mark has been broadcasting and writing about the gardening experience since the early 80s. He's written 24 books to date, including 2 biographies. In 2016, Mark was awarded the Order of Canada for his connections with everyday Canadians through his gardening and environmental messages. Ben is a 4th-generation gardener, food entrepreneur, and media personality as well. Ben's most recent endeavors have been the launch of a new book with Mark, Escape to Reality, How the World is Changing and How Gardening is Changing the World, as well as managing Cullen's Foods, a food business which seeks to connect consumers more directly with farmers. Mark, Ben, thank you so much for joining us today. I'd like to hand things over to you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate the invitation very much, and your friendship too. You mentioned that we're friends. Well, we're very good friends, and you have been a friend to the Highway of Heroes tree campaign too, which we started about 8 years ago here, and our goal was to plant a tree for every Canadian who fell during war, at war, since 1812, 117,000 trees on the Highway of Heroes right-of-way, and then another 1.8 million trees on the other side of the right-of-way. 1.8 million Canadians have volunteered for military service in Canada during times of war, including the Afghan conflict less than a decade ago. And Paul, you've been there from the very beginning. You've been extremely generous. You've been extremely helpful, and I want to thank you for that. By the way, folks, we're 95% of our way there on our financial goals. Our goal was to raise $10 million, and we've raised $9.5 million. And Paul, you've had a very big hand in that. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. So Ben, where do you want to start?
Well, it looks like we're starting here on your garden pathway, and with the question, you have your palette, and what are you going to paint? And the palette, of course, is Many shades of yellow, sunshine, color of hope, Pantone color of the year. Hope is growing color scheme for 2021. And so what are we going to paint yellow?
Okay, and I'm going to answer that question my way in just a minute, but can I ask you a question? You're on the board of Communities in Bloom, which I've been associated with for 17 years now, and I see in our list of participants, the interesting thing about doing these Zoom calls is that if you go to the list of participants, there are no secrets about who's here today. And I see Bob Lewis is out there and other names that remind me of my many wonderful years of working with Communities in Bloom and traveling the country with Raymond Carrière, sometimes with him, sometimes not, but traveling the country on behalf of Communities in Bloom. And here we are at a very new juncture, almost 2 years now into a new relationship with the CNLA, which is the Canadian Nursery Landscape Association. And Ben, I think they're doing a fabulous job. They have made some wonderful changes. This is a very exciting time to be connected with Communities in Bloom. As a board member, would you agree?
I fully agree. And I think, I mean, not just that, but the new partnership formed at what a point in time, what a point in history under the circumstances that we're in. I think they've done an excellent job of pivoting and reimagining Communities in Bloom under the circumstances that we were all been given, that we're all living in now. But you know what? Gardening is more popular than ever. It's been one of the ways that a lot of people are seeing their way through this is through the garden. And really, what better organization to be a part of to promote that? So couldn't agree more.
So Ben, is this the appropriate time for me to ask you? And I'm going to talk to you about my 20,000 daffodils in 1 second. You asked me a good question. And we're going to start a deep dive on what the Gardens of Hope are and how you can plant yellow. But what is a Garden of Hope? And so yellow is the Pantone color of the year. What other reasons are there that viewers today, people who have joined us for this presentation, would want to plant a Garden of Hope? And what does a Garden of Hope look like?
I wish I could attribute the quote, but there is something to the effect: to plant a garden is an act of hope. Where does that quote come from? Maybe you know better than I do, but perhaps
it wasn't me. It wasn't me, but I agree with it.
Maybe somebody could put it in the chat where I'm stealing that from. But I mean, really, there's no better act when more than ever, I think people are looking for hope, because it's been a long, cold, crummy winter. It's been a long year. And I think a lot of people, you know, as mentioned, we saw vegetable gardening just explode in popularity last year. And I call that a sticky trend. I think once you start, Audrey Hepburn, thank you, Christine Pollard. Audrey Hepburn said it. And I think it's what I call a sticky trend. I think it's something that once you start, it becomes a habit that you keep with for life. So I think that's one silver lining that's come out of the last year. And I think that planting in yellows is one way to celebrate that. So that's my interpretation.
Well, I think that's a nice setup. And can I talk about daffodils now?
All right, let's talk about your daffodils, because I know how important they are to you.
Well, the thing about daffodils is this. Mary, my wife, 40 years now, 40 years, her hair is even more gray than mine. What does that mean? It means I'm probably a little harder on her. Well, the point is, we love Britain, and we've been to Britain I don't know how many times. Ben, I have a picture of you right here of you in Britain. As a matter of fact, hey, look at this. You know who that is? That's you at the Wellington statue, right? Duke of Wellington, I think, or is it Nelson? Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Fact is, we took you there at a very young age. And I realized in going to Great Britain that they love to grow daffodils. So they put 250,000 daffodils in Green Park, right across from Buckingham Palace, to celebrate the 75th wedding anniversary of Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth. And we were there that spring. I think that was a year you came with us, the first year you came with us. And I looked at these daffodils. I said to myself, Mark, I said, you can grow daffodils. These things naturalize. You know what that means? When something naturalizes,
Yeah.
Just keeps coming back, coming back, coming back. Yeah, I thought, I'm going to go home. I'm going to plant 2,000 daffodils. So I planted 2,000 daffodils. And this is important, folks. Buy varieties that naturalize, not just garden variety daffodils, but daffodils that naturalize, which means year after year, they not only come back, but they actually get better. So a clump like this becomes a clump like this, and then eventually a clump like this. And that's what happens with naturalizing daffodils. So why do I like daffodils? I like them because they're colorful. They're early in the season. Some of them are fragrant. Deer don't like them. They're mildly toxic. Like, don't take that. Don't put too fine a point on that. But the fact is, deer don't like them. Vermin don't like them. They're insect and disease free. You can cut them and bring them indoors. I love daffodils. Now, daffodils and narcissus are in the same family. So I now have 20,000 daffodils and narcissus that I planted, 2,000 a year for 10 years on my 10-acre garden. I quit because I ran out of space. I thought, I don't need any more daffodils. Nobody coming here is going to say, oh, I see you planted more daffodils. So I decided, that's it.
I think we call I think we call that a diminishing marginal return.
Very good. Very good.
Well,
so
you know,
that's,
so here's
that's
the
my
thing,
pitch
and here's
for
the thing I want to
daffodils.
explain to the people who are looking at this picture of dandelions, because I respect the intellect of our audience enough that they're not passing these off as daffodils. We know that we're looking at dandelions, and I'm used to controlling my own slides, and this is always sort of a punchline, because as part of naturalizing daffodils, of course, and this is a really important point, and you taught me this when I was living at home cutting the grass between all 20,000 daffodils, is that you have to let them stand so that the green energy can go back right into the bulb so that you can see them again next year. And you do end up with this type of a picture that follows. So it's an inversion. You have the yellow daffodils, 20,000 of them, and then as those fade, they are
20 million.
Space in between is replaced with 1 million
20
dandelions.
million
And you know what?
Dandelions.
That's fine. It's a color of hope.
I just want you to know that I think it's really cruel that you would show this picture to these folks. These are my friends. These are my contemporaries. You're showing all these. Now, the fact is, I got over the dandelion plague many, many years ago. I love dandelions. And to Ben's point, I leave my dandelions when they're in bloom. There's this temptation to go out with a lawnmower and cut them down. You could actually cut around my clumps of daffodils if you wanted to, but I do let them bloom. You know why I let them bloom? Why do I let them bloom?
Well, I'm assuming it has something to do with Heather's honey.
So Heather's honey?
So my sister Heather keeps beehives on the property, food and shelter honey, and these dandelions are abuzz in the spring. That's one reason, and the other reason is I personally don't mind them. Yellow's fine. And I think if there's anything to be said for resilience, dandelions live it. So, I take a nod from the dandelions. But that being said, I do like to get to them before they go to seed.
Did you know they're edible? Dandelions?
Of course. I mean, that's how we got them.
Of course. How many dandelions have you eaten lately?
Not enough. Got to shift the balance of my diet. All right. So that's spring. That's the lawn. That's the dandelions. That's the daffodils. Next slide. Okay. While we're on the subject of lawns, you know how I feel about lawns. I like to keep the color going all season long. I am not a big Kentucky bluegrass guy. I think I like bluegrass music, but I'm not committed to the perfect lawn. And this here is by a friend of mine locally in Guelph. This is what I call the anti-lawn or the alternative lawn. And what you see in it, and I was going through my slides, my favorite pictures of gardens, and I saw hope. I saw yellow in Dorothea's alternative lawn, which is in the foreground. That is Potentilla numeniana, Nana. And what she's done over the years is she's just put in plugs. And then, of course, you can see the white clover. And then she's also got some creeping strawberry in the margins. And she barely mows it. And it does everything that you need a lawn to do, which is fill the spaces. It tolerates a decent amount of foot traffic, but it provides ecological services that a lawn doesn't, which is back to those bees and that honey. This is a buzz all summer long. And because of the root growth that you get on these plants, it actually looks, in my opinion, better than a lawn during a drought. It tends to hold its color much better. So that's
A
my
lawn during a drought looks pretty bad, let's face it, because we're not watering the lawn anymore, right? We don't do that.
no.
So, yeah, I agree with you. By the way, where do I get Potentilla numaniana nana? Where do I get that?
Well, I would start by looking at the Hope is Growing webpage for our partners through the Canadian Garden Centers Association. And I'd start by calling them because it's your independent garden centers that are going to have the best selection of this type of stuff.
Oh, good, good. Nice segue. Good.
Thanks.
That's what I'm going to do.
Next slide, please. I don't even know who I'm asking to switch slides here, but
Andrew.
I'm begging the universe. Okay, thank you. The universe delivers. Ask and the universe delivers. So I was looking at the seed catalogs because if you haven't already, you should have ordered your seeds, but it's not too late. And I think you could put together a pretty cool Hope garden in 2021. The temptation, of course, a lot of the greatest yellow vegetables grow under the ground. I tried deliberately to choose some here that are above ground. And some pointers here, okay? Peaches and cream. Somebody's going to ask, Ben, why didn't you choose one of the golden varieties? Peaches and cream is just the best sweet corn. Change my mind. You won't, but there is yellow there. And otherwise, what are you going to find? We've got some melons, bright yellow. This Golden Delight zucchini, the summer squash in the bottom left.
Fantastic.
I think it's the easiest thing you could possibly grow. If you have enough space.
And sun. You got to have heat.
Heat.
You need heat. By the way, where did you find the peaches and cream beans? Where'd they come from?
Oh, I think that's a typo. So that's what happens when I make these presentations in the middle of the night.
Oh, I see. I think they're yellow beans.
Now I think, okay, but I want to pause on the summer squash thing here because there's a really neat thing you could do with summer squash, and I should have put a picture in here that kids love, and you do it for my niece and nephews, and that's when the zucchini fairy comes to town.
That's true. You know, the zucchini fairy visited the vegetable garden when you were just a little squirt smaller than you are now. And it was fun. All you do is you just take a penknife and carve Ben into it. And you do it when it's about that size. You see the zucchini pictured here. Well, when it's about that size, you carve Ben in or whatever, your own name, Paul, whatever. And you don't have to wait very long. 3-4 days, maybe a week, and dig it up. Oh, not dig it up. Cut it. Harvest it.
And what you'll have is basically it scabs over. You make a little sign out of it, and kids love that when they're starting to recognize their own name in print. It's a really fun thing for them to do.
Yeah, that's true.
Hey, forget the kids. Hey, forget kids for a minute. Put a message of hope in there. Right hope. Right hope is growing. 3 zucchinis.
Oh. Yeah, that's true. And then take it and put it at your front door so that when the Amazon delivery guy comes, he sees Hope right at your front door. That would be so cool, wouldn't it?
There you go. Well, I mean, you think of Amazon as this robotic, super advanced corporation. It's people carrying these packages to your door.
Amazon are people too.
Yeah, totally. Next slide, please. Okay, so here are some flowers that you can grow from seed. I like growing flowers from seed because it's cheaper. That's why. That's the simple reason. It's cheaper.
But it's fun. It's therapeutic.
It's
you put the seed in the ground, you nurture it. Why don't you start with the top left here? Fiesta Gitana Superior. What is that? I've never seen that before. What is it?
This was a collection on dam of calendula. I think that's right.
Calendula. That's what it looks like. Pot marigold.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think when you're putting together a Hope garden, that's sort of the size and scale you want in the margins, because certainly I know how easy it is to get carried away with the big sunflowers, which is still one of my favorite flowers to grow. Don't get me wrong. I like large gray stripe, or I also love Russian mammoth. Russian giant is popular. You just see how, I mean, talk about childlike wonder. How big and dramatic can you get with the sunflowers? And of course, the birds love them. They're cool. But you also have to scale down, because we know Hope gardens, in many instances, are as simple as a planter or a small space garden. And that's where things like the calendula and the small, like the Provence, the cutting sunflowers really come into play, because they're going to give you so much color and they are so easy to grow. So those are my recommendations. Teddy Bear, there is actually a sunflower variety. I think it's pollenless. But it's going to give you, it's going to grow like a sunflower, it's going to color like a sunflower, but it has that cool fuzzy flower on it. So
Another good one for kids, right?
another good one for kids.
Although I like, when I grow sunflowers, I kind of like that they produce a lot of pollen. And you said this is pollen-less, didn't you?
A lot of the varieties are, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where you can select. I mean, I encourage
Yeah.
people to look. There aren't, to my knowledge, too many sunflower varieties that don't perform. Pretty robust, easy to grow,
Yeah.
simple to plant. So hey, shop by, paint by number, just buy by the picture. But the other one here, and I don't want to steal too much thunder from Paul, because I know Paul's part of the presentation has quite an emphasis on natives, but I think really we would be amiss to skip over black-eyed Susan, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, Rudbeckia. You know, I call this a gas station plant. You know why? Because they grow this at gas stations all over the place. And if they grow it, you know, it's got to be easy to grow because they don't like maintaining their gardens very well. And when you put Rudbeckia hirta into the ground, it's nice, reliable perennial to about zone 4. So yeah, there's maybe some viewers today in the prairies would have a little trouble with it, but it will grow in a nice sunny spot and a protected spot if you're out there. And it blooms for up to 10 weeks. A perennial that blooms for up to 10 weeks. There's some annuals don't bloom for 10 weeks. So it's pretty amazing plant. And it's another pollinator plant. And it's related to, it is a hybrid, but it's related to a native plant.
Yes. And while we're talking about long bloomers at this time of year, certainly I would be looking at my local Dahlia Society. Often they're selling their tubers at this time of year. Wherever you can get your hand on, there's some nice yellow varieties of dahlias, which I mean, I like to, you know, some people just put their dahlia tubers right in the ground, which depending on where you live, you can do that. I like to start my dahlia tubers inside, transplant them, and get that absolute maximal color throughout the season. Which,
that's true.
You know, if you're just thinking about,
earlier, longer, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't, once they start blooming, they don't stop blooming. By the way, you don't have potentilla in here. Now, speaking of prairie plants, a hardy Canadian prairie plant, potentilla is a great yellow flowering plant. Blooms most of summer too.
Good one. Good one. And of course, we have marigolds, which we can't miss. And in the chat, thank you, Marvin Miller. New petunia, bee's knees, is yellow as well. So
really,
there you go.
Does it attract bees?
Yeah, it better. Thank you for advancing that slide. We're getting a hint from somebody. So this is how you plant your flowers, and I really like this approach because it's kind of wild and crazy.
Well, thank you, Ben. I'll tell you my secret here. I'm going to tell you what my secret is, and it won't be a secret anymore. What I do is this is my vegetable garden, and I like to have pollinating plants in the vegetable garden because the pollinators help maximize the fruit-bearing potential of the vegetables out there, the tomatoes, the peppers, the cucumbers, the squash, anything with a flower on it that produces fruit of some kind, including the fruit like the apples and the pears, benefits from a high population of pollinators in the garden. So I leave one strip about 8 feet wide, 120 feet long. And what I do is I buy about 70 packets of my favorite seed, flower seed. This is very scientific. I go to the garden center, I look at what they have, and I say, I like Cosmos. I'll take 3 of those. I'll take I'll take sunflowers. There's about 30 packets of sunflowers here, representing about 15 different varieties. And there's Nigella in there, and there are marigolds, and there's zinnias. And what I do is I open them all, put them into a bucket, into a bottom of a bucket, and then I take either dry sand or vermiculite and I half fill the bucket. And by the way, the bucket has a lid. So I put the lid on the bucket and then I shake it like this. And the only reason I'm putting the dry sand in there or the vermiculite is I want a carrier. Otherwise, when I put my hand in and I start spreading these seeds by hand, which is how I do it, Ben, I'm halfway through the bed and I don't have any seeds left. So it's a way of kind of spreading out the seeds. And we have this notion when we plant seeds that they should really go a lot closer together than they need to. And so you want to spread them out, 70 packets over 120 feet by 8 feet wide. And there's the results right there. That's what it is. It's my pollinator garden. And you should see the hummingbirds in there starting
Yeah.
sometime in, starts to bloom about middle end of June, and it just goes to beat the band till frost.
It's really amazing. I kind of think of this as like splatter painting. You know, you put your brush in the bucket and you just splatter all over the place, and it's really fun. I mean, it's different every year, and
Yeah,
you can engineer this by kind of selecting your seed mix.
that's
It's
true.
so
Um,
definitely something I recommend.
yeah,
And so
and
Tom
there's a
Sari asks, do you spread seeds on the grass? No, you rototill or you do prepare a seed bed.
Yeah, I do. I don't rototill it anymore. I used to, but you taught me not to do that. You said, Mark, or Dad, you're damaging the soil. You're creating problems. Don't do that. So now I run through it with a hoe to knock down the weeds. But I also have some perennials established here, like the 8-foot high Rudbeckia. We were talking about the Herta. There's a variety that goes like super high. I probably got about 15 clumps of that stuff in there, and some Cimicifuga and some other perennials. So now I do the same thing with the seeds, but I do it around the established clumps of perennials. And I always just turn the soil over enough that you get germination. That's the important thing. So you do the soil prep, you put the seeds down by hand, you rake it smooth, and then I go have a beer.
You go have a beer. Good. Well, I started a stopwatch just so we wouldn't go over here. We should keep clicking along here.
That's fine.
Lest we eat up any of Paul's time. Next slide, please. Universe. Ta-da. Okay, well, this is a picture I slotted in here from Chelsea. So in May 17, 2017, we don't have to dwell on it for too long, but I mean, just the intensity of color that's possible when you start working with flowers. See, the celosia is giving you yellow, and the snapdragon's giving you yellow, and I think I see some dahlia spotted throughout there as well. I mean,
it's a great photograph, and it gives people that haven't seen the Chelsea Flower Show. You're right; it's the long weekend of May, Ben, and it runs actually for a week. So it's a week leading up to, and including the long weekend of May. Not happening this year, evidently. There might be some sort of virtual version of it, but it's with COVID, it's not going to happen. But we look forward to when it can, because we're going back, right?
Oh yeah. Well, I got a sister over there. I guess she's worth visiting. So maybe we'll see her while we're at Chelsea.
That'd be good.
And the other thing, the other thing, of course, is you might feel challenged trying to design a garden that is strictly yellow. Another take on the Hope is Growing garden is to create a focal point. So this is some of that Rudbeckia again, and then I see some Solidago in the foreground, which, by the way, underrated native. Some people think it's a weed, the goldenrod. Amazing plant, the ecological services and the species it supports. So definitely propagate that in your Hope garden and put a frame around it. So this is a gate. This is a garden gate, and then there's your focal point with everything else in the backdrop. Anything to add?
Yeah, just one thing. You and I, for our podcast, The Green File, interviewed Douglas Talamy, and Douglas Talamy said that goldenrod is the new milkweed. That's interesting.
That's very interesting. And I think the milkweed story is a very interesting one itself when you talk about conservation, ecological gardening.
Yeah.
Spill it out. Spill it out. So what are we looking at? We're looking at the world's greenest gas shed.
That's true. So when I moved to the farm here, Mary and I moved to the farm about 17 years ago, I didn't want to put the gas in the barn because, that'd be stupid. So I built a shed that if it burns down, like whatever. And I built it with a green roof. And just want to urge you to try this because this worked out so well. It's very low tech. I didn't buy a system. What I did was I created the roof about this deep, about 4-foot cavity throughout, and then I filled it with sempervivums and sedums, totally drought tolerant. I watered it when I first put it up there about 15 years ago. I have never watered it since. And what happened was some of the sempervivums with the yellow variety spilled over. And if you look on the ground, you can see where the gold is in bloom on the ground as it is on the roof. And it looks like it's the gold has spilled off the shed onto the ground. And I think it's really cool. This is something that's visible from the street. People drive into the property when this is in bloom and they take pictures of it.
Yeah, they do. It's a very neat thing and it's underused space. So something we definitely recommend. All right, next slide, please, Universe. So this is kind of our, I guess, maybe our parting message. And I think, whether you plant a hope garden, which we encourage you to do, and you hashtag it Hope is Growing and you put your garden on the map, or whether you're just out enjoying the outdoors in the way that we all have, in the way that, has really gotten us through this, keep an eye out, look for hope, find hope. Maybe it's your forsythia in the neighborhood, like we've seen here. That's a picture here in Guelph. Couldn't help myself to just stop and snap that picture. But look for hope, and you're going to find it in the garden in 2021. And that's kind of our parting message. Anything to add, Dad?
I want to say thank you to you, Ben. Working with my son is just such a great experience. And every day I learn something new. Every time we work together doing this sort of thing, because using formal notes is not a strong point, I always learn something. So thanks so much, Ben. And you put together the PowerPoint. So all I had to do was show up. And really, life doesn't get any better than this. Folks, enjoy your year in the garden.
Thanks, everyone. We'll turn it over to Paul again.
Great. Well, thank you both so much, gentlemen. Always a pleasure chatting with you. And I know we're going to have some questions at the end that I'm sure you'd be much better qualified to answer than I am. But you touched on some really great points today. I'm looking at this from a bit more of the technical perspective and maybe a little bit more formalized design. But when you talk about natives and pollinators, the way you create your garden space with seed and sand as your broadcast medium, there's no better way to create a natural looking garden. It sort of creates a random, built by chance, designed by chance. That's how the wind carries seed. That's how animals get seed stuck to their fur and sort of send new plants across the country, across the nation. So that's kind of how our program this year is running. We're trying to make this a really organic campaign. The Hope is Growing is meant to be something that everybody can do. And it's a matter of, like you said, plant seeds in that little space. Plant them in the cracks in the sidewalk could be a fun way to do it. It really doesn't matter where they go. Everybody has space. And if we look at planting seeds that we can use as pollinators, we're actually doing a huge environmental service. As you mentioned, both of you, without pollinators, we're not going to have any food. So we're really, by planting seeds and planting pollinators, planting hope, we're planting food for ourselves. Our friends, the bees and butterflies as well, huge benefit to them to carry plantings through the garden for them. So, next slide, please, Andrew. The variety of vegetables that are out there and fruits is absolutely astounding. You guys touched on a number of them. I look at vegetables as well as also part of the design palette. What better way to get color into a garden and then also use them as edibles? But plant corn on the cob is an amazing one, but popcorn corn is an amazing one for kids. So if you have children planting corn seeds so they can make their own popcorn, what better way to teach them the connection to the ground and the soil? Happens to be yellow. So the kids are going to hope for a great load of popcorn at the end before the raccoons can get to it. But just an amazing selection out there of different vegetables and fruits that we can get that yellow. Next, please, Andrew. So talking about children in the garden, there's no better place to start learning. There's no better time to start becoming a gardener is when you're a child. Ben, I know we saw that picture earlier of you. I know you've probably been out on more garden tours already than most of us will ever see in a lifetime. But starting with your nieces and your nephews, people's children and grandchildren, in a classroom, if children are planting sunflower seeds in the window of a classroom or planting at home if they're doing remote learning, what better easy way to get them started than planting a yellow hope garden? And putting them out on the doorstep, that zucchini with hope scribed into it, I think that's a really inspiring way we can show everyone how easy it is to grow hope. And if you go into the Hope is Growing website, there is the logo available to download. So you can put a Hope is Growing sign in your own garden, in your own window, in the back of your car, to show people that how easy it is. And let's spread the word about this campaign growing across Canada and then internationally as well. And I know we do have some of our international friends on. I think Bob Iveson is there from the UK in the background. Some of our other great friends who's been with CIB for a long time, and hopefully some new friends that are signing in for the first time today. Next, please. Andrew, if you're back there, thanks so much. So I'm a landscape architect. I'm also an avid gardener, but a novice at gardening. But really, I look at natives are the primary palette we have been using with our studio for many, many years. And municipalities are finally gravitating back to the value and use of natives. But we look at this picture here, and sure, it's not all yellow, but there's a huge predominance of yellow. And there are so many different great natives that flower yellow, serve an incredible array of environmental purposes, but can give us just a really bright, cheerful show of it. Thomas Rayner is an amazing designer who just creates so many great garden spaces. And I look at this picture, that's a designed garden. And that breaks away from the tradition of row on row on row of planting and formalized and hedged. This is a bigger version of that cascading and spreading a seed mix with sand. Really trying to let those edges blur out and determine, is that a native tree that was naturally occurring? Was it planted there and then allowed to naturalize? But what a great opportunity to be able to bring different colors through space. And I agree with you, Ben. I'm not a big fan of Kentucky bluegrass. It has its merits and has its places for very high traffic and sports fields and things like that. But if the only time you're walking across a lawn is when you're pushing a mower, there's so many better environmental choices that can help improve soil quality, create space for pollinators, and then just give us, a really fun, interesting space that we look at, and every day there's a different color coming to life, different shades of yellow coming through, not just that, forever green look that we chase and try and keep up with and try and make work. So next slide, please. We talk about natives as a palette, and I'm not just talking about native trees. It starts right at the beginning. We've got some really, really great natives, and we don't see a lot of native trees planted anymore. Some of the bigger varieties, definitely take large space, and some of them, realistically don't like to be developed into urban settings. Sugar maples are a really hard tree to establish in an urban setting. But if you have space, and now I'm talking to municipalities where you have space, green space that you maybe don't have capacity anymore to have the funding to manicure and take care of, and it's also not used as a manicured space. What better place to plant trees? Plant hope. If you're somewhere near the Highway of Heroes, the Highway of Heroes campaign is looking for open land to plant trees into, to honor our veterans. So planting natives in the right place, it's right tree, right place. I'm not saying always natives, but there's some great opportunities. So we can help to restore some of our natives back in, and they are host to so many species compared to some of the modern cultivars we're seeing coming out of the nurseries. So next one, Andrew. Fall color isn't always yellow in all these. The sugar maple, depending on the season, you'll get a different tone out of it. But that's also part of the fun as well. What makes the sugar maple yellow on a given year versus oranges or reds? Some of our smaller varieties getting into marginal lands, things like the larch, Larix laricinea, great tree, beautiful fall color to it, makes a reasonably good seasonal privacy buffer, and will take a moderate amount of pruning in there, so it can be kept to a bit of a smaller variety. Or I look at something like a tulip tree, one of our biggest natives in North America, but what an astounding tree to watch grow in a garden, and let the kids understand that, a tree that large that actually flowers is kind of unusual. That is a predominant visual flower. But a great way to create shade in a park. Again, for municipalities looking for bigger spaces, how do you use up a bigger space or fill it to cut down on your maintenance? Plant some bigger native trees. That'll give you some amazing shade for people when we're all looking for more outdoor space. And I think over the next decade, we're really going to be looking backwards to determine how best to utilize our public spaces, understanding that, people are going to be sticking closer to home, I think, for a long time now. And maybe some of us in some ways and fashions will learn to appreciate that much more, the value of our open spaces at home rather than having to travel. So, next, Andrew. So put the questions to the ends if you have any, please, and we'll make sure we'll try and get to them as well. Ben, you talked about goldenrod. I mean, there's a couple of different species of golden cultivars out there, but it's an amazing plant from a pollinator perspective. Does a really great job of stabilizing soils on hillsides where we have erosion control problems. So I use it in a number of our projects, and it's teaching clients and friends and colleagues that it's a wonderful plant in the right context. That barren strawberry is another one you mentioned earlier. Great ground cover to stabilize, and will take a moderate amount of traffic again. And if you're, extremely patient, you can let it fill in to create a fairly large garden space. It's a bit of a slow spreader in a lot of applications, but a good, tough, rugged plant. Next. Where we get into a lot of our plantings for clients, and it's that managed wild edge of woodlot and reclaimed spaces. We start looking at some of the different native shrubs, and there's a really great mix, and they're typically woodlot edge plantings, and they do a good job of, once they get settled in, of crowding out things like buckthorn, which is becoming a rampant problem as we're seeing in municipal and park spaces. I'm speaking from an Ontario perspective here, but it's becoming a really hard plant to manage. So those native shrubs, if we can get them established and settled in front, we've got a better opportunity to keep that buffer under control. Next one, Andrew. Rudbeckia is one of our favorites. We contend with that in all its different sizes, shapes, and forms. But some from the giant Rudbeckias are in a really nice background. We'll use those as a summer hedge to create privacy. We use corn, back to that plant. Corn is a great privacy hedge. It's a hot weather grass that happens to produce food, is really what it is. So instead of miscanthus, try corn for a year. Pretty interesting way to create that user-friendly garden space, back to children and food production. Bulbs are a great understory. Don't ever forget about putting them into play. There's always room for bulbs. And even if the garden space might look full, the bulbs will find their way, especially those great naturalizers. They're going to find a way to fill out and spill out in areas you might not expect. But that's the joy and true fun of gardening, is letting Mother Nature, kind of take over some of that control and letting it lay back a bit. When you talked about leaving your daphs and your narcissus up so that they can pull their energy back into the bulb to reproduce, that's a tough thing for people to think about. Some people would call that messy. That's actually real great productivity doing that. And it's understanding that if we look at a bit of a new norm to what we have from a gardening perspective, let it be a little bit looser. That's going to allow nature to come in. So we're not managing the space quite as strongly. If we're not managing it as strongly, we can take some of our costs out of that and really understand that soft edge. Everyone travels to see gardens. Everyone travels to see nature. Well, they can be one and the same, but nature never plants in rows. So I think it's a great way that we can look at all these different opportunities from windowsills to massive parks and woodlots. that we can do our part here and put our Hope is Growing campaign together. And I know there's a lot of people that are really looking for some way to stay connected with their community, stay connected with friends and family. And again, this campaign is just such an easy starting point that we can all do that. So Andrew's going to throw up that last slide there to show you again where we're going to get to when you're looking for information, looking for a way to download, to put a sign forward. But at this stage, I just want to thank Mark and Ben again. You guys have been friends for a long time. You've been friends to this campaign and many others that we've tried to put forth to make sure that people understand that as gardeners, we can all make a difference. And there was an architect a number of years ago, we were at a campaign of his, and he said that, landscape architects, it's our time in the world to make change. This is the gardener's time in the world where we can make a change. We don't have to be professional designers. We don't have to be professional gardeners. The joy in experimenting is this program is that simple. Try it, you can't go wrong. Send us some of your pictures, and if you follow through the year to make this a bit of fun for everyone and keep us all connected. So I'm going to go down to the question and answer and see who we've got signed in and see if we can answer some questions for us. So Kathy has asked simply the launch date for our Hope is Growing campaign. It actually launched on March 1st, and it was a soft launch, but we put it out to some of our media partners in social media. So we're underway now. As Ben mentioned, if you go onto the Hope is Growing website, you can see the map we've got put up, and that's the garden centers. And they're one of our partners in this that are helping put this project forward. So if you have a local garden center, they can help you out from that perspective. And I think no better place to start contending with how do we put our campaign together. Ben, Mark, Sandy had asked a question previously about the cut flower. And she's sort of saying they're beautiful, of course, and they aren't invasive. What do you think of that plant?
I'll be honest, I'm not familiar with it. What's a cup flower? Do you know, Paul?
I know it. It's large, and I wouldn't say it's invasive. I would use the word aggressive, perhaps, but could be 6-7 feet tall. So it's a great perennial. I have seen it naturalize in moist areas, so that's where maybe the word invasive might start coming into play. I don't use it that often myself, but I do know of it.
Yeah, we have to be careful with invasives, don't we?
Yeah.
I do not have any experience.
So in our planting styles, we work regionally, but I find in urban settings, I'm a little more open as to what plant species we'll use because I know they're relatively contained in an urban core. Dealing with naturalized areas and anywhere near waterfront, that's where we do stick to our true native palette. So we're not accidentally putting windblown seeds into a creek or river or lake and watching them kind of float down and reseed themselves. That's where we're seeing things like the giant hogweed is such a horribly aggressive, and it loves bottomlands. The seeds float down the river, and next thing you know, the whole river course is badly infested.
Right.
So
poisonous.
Yeah. I had a question here about potential plants to avoid. Well, there's a great one. Being an invasive as well. Some of the others, some of the cultivars of Rudbeckia, the Rudbeckia goldstrum. I don't know there's a stronger, longer blooming flower out there.
Yeah.
Maybe the Gaillardias would be a comparable. But Rudbeckia goldstrum is a very strong cedar. So we will use those in urban settings, but we don't use them in naturalized areas again.
The gas station plant.
Yes, exactly.
So, what do you say? What's your opinion on the Jerusalem artichoke? I see it come up in the chat here. That can be fairly aggressive, can it?
Yeah, that's one that again, not in my palette of users, but I know you both have mentioned that one to me in the past as a avoid or be very cautious of containment.
I agree.
Rogers has-
I had some in my previous vegetable garden, Ben, and I would never plant it again. No, you plant it, you're stuck with it. You never get rid of it. The roots go down like this. It's like a cultivated Phragmites, you know, you're married to it.
Monster.
Hmm.
Monster. Do we have any photos of the squash with word hope carved into them? We don't have the word hope carved into them, but we do have pictures of squash, zucchini fairy squashes, don't we? That we could share.
Yeah.
So.
And yellow zucchini is not hard to find.
No. Bob Iveson has a question in the background asking about, does Communities in Bloom have local, regional, or international contacts to support communities? And absolutely, yes, Bob, that's a great point to bring up. So we have, and the national branch of Communities in Bloom, that's who I'm really representing with, but each province has their own Communities in Bloom association, as well as some international associations as well. So if you find your local branch, I will call it, local chapter, is a great way to reach out. And then the communities can also look at signing up to becoming a community team member or member of Communities in Bloom. There's a great way to start, and that is often a horticultural group will put themselves together and go out to the municipality looking for maybe vacant land. Community gardens, vegetable production gardens, that can be a Communities in Bloom garden. Especially this year, we're talking about Hope is Growing. If it's a food garden, it's a Hope is Growing garden, I'm sure. There's going to be some yellows in there. So very easy to reach out to your local Communities in Bloom association for that. Kathy Med has been asking when online materials will be ready. Kathy, they're sort of in process now, so keep checking back. The website is being populated and sort of filled out as we speak. Our staff in the background have been doing an amazing job of trying to keep up with all the ideas coming forth as we refresh and renew Communities in Bloom. With the pandemic, that we've looked at it as, you know, what better time to look at how Communities in Bloom can really maintain its relevance and find new ways to be relevant to communities and to families. Donna Rogers is asking, seniors housing is establishing a community garden, so a housing group, I think. Do you know of any grants that we could apply for to assist with our startup tasks? Afraid I don't have maybe a specific answer for that one, Donna, but I know that there are different, a lot of time, different horticultural groups. They're looking for land. So you might just work out that you find a Hort Society or a Communities in Bloom group who has the idea of they want to plant gardens or they want to establish gardens, but they don't have any space to put them on. Some municipalities, you know, will sort of grant or permit different groups to work on open space with liabilities. Now, sometimes that's a little bit challenging, but might be a really great partnership. You could put together, you know, a local group that has the means and the ways to get the plants in the ground, and then the seniors community can enjoy the fruits of their labor, so to speak, and have a garden in their space. Darlene is asking in the background, great one for you too. Any suggestions for plantings for children's gardens?
Can I help with that?
I really like.
Darlene, I think this is Darlene from
first.
Castlegar in British Columbia. And
I believe.
Hi, Darlene. Nice to see you. We've spent some time together in Castlegar and Trail, and what a beautiful part of the world. I just learned about this very recently. It's called Plant a Seed and See What Grows. And it's a website. It's a not-for-profit organization based out of British Columbia. Plant a Seed and See What Grows. They offer this book, which is a Canadian book in English and in French, for free to teachers, to parents, to anybody that has children. I have grandchildren, so they sent me a copy. And Ben and I will be spending a little bit of time in the next couple of months promoting this to educators. Now, this doesn't answer your question directly, Darlene, but it comes with a workbook. And it also comes, that is a workbook for each child. And so you tell them how many kids are in your class or whatever. And it also comes with an instruction manual. So it helps the parent or the teacher or the guardian understand how best to use this book. It's for 5-year-olds to 10-year-olds, but I read it to a 3-year-old just yesterday. And this is a kid with a pretty short attention span too. And he listened to the whole book. I couldn't believe it. They call him Little Mark, and he actually listened to the whole book. So plant a seed and seewhatgrows.com. Go look it up and see what they are offering. And the amazing thing is no cost, no cost. And I think you'll be impressed. That doesn't tell you how to start a children's garden. Sorry.
Well, if we're talking yellow plants that are great with kids, I think the yellow summer squash, as we've discussed at some length now, is great. The other one that I really loved as a kid and still is forsythia, because you could just take forsythia cuttings, stick them in the ground, and you have basically an instant planting. But you can do some really neat stuff with it as well. And we've presented before ways that you can use forsythia to make forts. Like if you use forsythia cuttings and plant them in a circle with a small gap, over time that'll fill in, and you can create a children's playhouse that's living, right? And it's made of forsythia, and of course you get that awesome yellow bloom. So if anybody's pruning forsythia in your neighborhood, make sure you grab those cuttings.
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, our time is coming to a close for today. What an inspirational and fun way to start this year's program for Communities in Bloom. Thank you so much for spending time with us here. And thanks everyone for signing in today. Want to make sure everyone remembers we have recorded this webinar so you can watch it later, you can share it later. And we also want to give another big thank you to our program sponsors and partners who've helped bring this campaign to life again this year. We know that everyone today is going to look at becoming a Hope is Growing champion or find a way to support the cause as they can in your own community. Again, I'll leave the last few words to both of you.
I would like to say thank you to you, Paul, as the chairman of Communities in Bloom, the new Communities in Bloom. You're a volunteer and you're extremely busy with your business, and yet you carve out time from your schedule so you can do this. And I think all of us owe you a great debt of thanks. The entire board, of course, the hundreds of volunteers, and knowing something about just how granular this goes, right down to the volunteers in the communities that come out and plant gardens, weed gardens, and celebrate the wonder of horticulture and the possibilities of gardening in Canada. To all of you, thanks so much. You're doing great work. Ben?
Yeah, I would only say, add to that, I'm so impressed by the passion of everybody up and down within Communities in Bloom. And I think that passion alone is reason for hope. So yeah, hope is growing, folks. Look forward to seeing all those hope gardens out there.
Great finish. Thank you so much, gentlemen. And I'm sure we'll see you throughout the year. Take care, everyone. And thanks everyone for joining in. Please be sure to check back to the website as we update for more information for you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.